everyone. This is week 4 in the present set, and this time I'm going to paint some pots of flowers in situ. This is the aspect that I have chosen. We painted pots of flowers before, but we generally just leave it at the pot of flowers and we don't tend to put any background or anything very much around it. So I thought it might be a good idea to carry on from where we've been working this time to actually just create a little bit of the surroundings just to show that it's where it's sitting, and we can work a little bit more on perspective without getting too complicated with it. So I've actually made a start, and I've very lightly painted in my background, as you can see, and put a few lights down because the concentration needs to be on the pots. So I'm going to try and make them as colourful as possible, but as I've said, I've tried to cover some things that we've already worked on this month, and that's bricks and perspective a little bit, and I've included some steps, so it all creates a much nicer and a nicer painting that tells more of a story. Okay, so this time I'd like you to do similar. It doesn't have to be pots of flowers, it can be anything, but whatever you choose from your garden or Pixabay or whatever, try to include something that has got a little bit of a surrounding that you can create some background and make a more interesting painting with, and obviously putting a bit of life in also if you can. So I'm actually going to start with the flowers, and I'll put the pots in afterwards. So couple of reds here. I've got cad-free red pale and cad-free red on its own. Just mixed it to put some nice red geraniums in. So I'm going to put the flowers in first, just dotting them in fairly loosely as we've done this month so far. Trying not to put separation between each one, but to create little clusters of flowers as well. And while it's still wet, just dot in a little bit of a deeper colour just to give some perspective within the actual flower. So I'm not copying my photograph exactly, but I'm just using it as inspiration for my picture, and I'll pop the little leaves and things in, all the foliage in after that. So I'm using a soft Kolinsky sable brush, size 7, which is medium sort of size, but in fact has softer bristles to make softer marks. Obviously the acrylic brushes are much stiffer and won't necessarily make life particularly easy if you're trying to get softer marks. So think about the brush that you use for each particular subject. Try to create nice shapes with your flowers, your collections of flowers. Some little pink flowers over this side. So I'm more or less sticking with the colour scheme, but creating different shapes than I actually see in the subject. Leaving white paper, leaving spaces to put the foliage in as well. And I'll have to work around these because I'm not using masking fluid, so I'm going to work around these shapes when I paint the pots. I've got quite large green leaves to deal with there, because putting the green in beside the red is going to look very good because they're complementary colours. Okay, so I'll leave that and come back to it if I need to actually put more colour in and go on to the next one. Just put a little bit more depth in at the back here, make it be really brave, and it's going to dry up quite a bit lighter, but I just feel that it's gone a bit weak there. So while that's still damp, it's a nice time to spread in a bit more of the purple, because there's always going to be perspective in colour as well, so you do need to think about that, the lights and darks. Right, some snapdragons here, and they're yellow, so I'm going to make them nice and bright, letting the brush do the work, just dotting in those nice tall shapes, which is going to give height to this particular pot of flowers. Maybe using another yellow as well, a paler one, just to create a little bit more variation. So lots to think about still, although it's a reasonably simple composition this week. There's still quite a lot to think about. Quinacridone magenta here. So obviously I haven't drawn these flowers perfectly, but I've just indicated the shapes that they are. It would look very overworked and hard to look at if every flower was concentrated on and painted exactly as they are. You just want to keep it soft and fairly distant. And a tip is, if you're sitting in the garden painting a situation like this, try not to sit too close to it. The further away you are, obviously the less you can see, and that's actually going to help with not putting too much colour in. Popping a little bit of purple here, although I can't see it in the subject, just against the yellow to make that thing. So already my pots of flowers are coming forward and leaving the background behind, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. So try to remember that, because if everything is of a similar tone, it's going to look quite hard and quite harsh. I'm using a different red here now. For these red flowers here. touch as little as you possibly can, and it's going to end up looking nice and fresh and free. Try not to leave big spaces between all your flowers though. It tends to happen quite a lot that people leave spaces, and if you look carefully you'll see that one flower is sitting right in front of another, and so therefore it looks more natural. So I guess it'll be flowers again this month, but think about the situation that you can actually sit them in and concentrate on some of the lovely techniques that we've been using this month. Dropping water back in always creates lovely natural looking shapes as well, especially for centres of flowers. If you have white flowers, you could use masking fluid. You could use masking fluid for all of it, but it's going to look a little bit too heavy and overworked if you're not careful. You have to use masking fluid very, very carefully. Right. Some of these have got quite dark centres, which you can see more in the front ones than you can the ones that are further back. So again, thinking about perspective and allowing this pot of flowers to recede a bit. Right, so I'm going to wait for it to dry before I actually put in the foliage, but I think I can work on the foliage on this one. So some nice green leaves here that have quite a bit of yellow in, which is good in the front. Still using my soft brush. Still trying to get variation. But I'm going to also use my dagger brush, which is 3/8 dagger brush, for some of the foliage as well, because I can twist it around and get pointy shapes, stalks and things like that with the point of the brush. But it's also slightly stiffer because it's an acrylic, or it's a mixture, I think. Part sable, part acrylic. So that's a stiffer brush, which helps me to create nicer shapes, or tinier shapes, that I need to put in between the flowers, because I don't want to block off all of the white spaces that I've left. This is really quite ideal for doing this. I am occasionally still looking at my subject, but you do tend to get carried away painting things like this and putting yourself into it and creating shapes and putting things where you feel it's going to work better, and that's a good thing. Can't see much foliage between these tiny little flowers here. I suppose that's lobelia. So not putting too much in there at all. Sorry. But popping these little darks in between the lights is going to give depth to the pot of flowers, which is what it needs. Now I'll leave that and go back, I think, in a bit, and if I need to bring any of the flowers up to make them look brighter, then I'd be better off doing that when it's dry. Some greenery here, which I could actually just pop a little bit more in at the base of it, because it's a bit nearer. Okay, so let's see. This isn't completely dry. You'll have more time than me, so don't rush. Make sure you've got some of the areas nice and dry before popping in. Let's come up a bit dark. That's better. Test your colours on a spare piece before applying it to the paper. And then you'll make sure you're getting it at the right strength. That's awful music, I'm going to turn it off. Try that one. Right, now it gets quite dark in places in this pot. It's a big pot, and so there's a lot in it, which creates a lot of depth, but you have to see how that goes. And I wanted this pot to be sitting in front of that pot because that one's further away, so hoping for a bit of perspective there. So I'm not looking for exact leaf shapes here, but just using the tip of my brush to indicate some leaf in the front, which is lighter. As I get towards the centre of this pot of flowers, it is going to get deeper in colour and quite a bit of depth in there. So wet on wet works quite well, or dropping water back in so that you don't get very solid marks. It will sort of give you looser, more natural looking marks because it'll bring a bit of light back in. That's basically why I do it. So you do need to mix up a variety of greens so that they're not all the same. You can see how the colours have actually dried up lighter. So less water you use in the first instance, I guess, would help with that. so that you don't have to go back too much to bring up the colour. But I do use a lot of water. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know, but I do. So you can vary the shapes that you're making with this brush, which is helpful, especially if you're in a hurry like me. There is a bit of candle wax on here, so actually popping this greenery over the area that's got candle wax on has worked really well. I was wondering why it was working out so well. So that's another little technique. If you've got some woodwork to put in your picture, you can use the candle wax to make it look like older wood. Right. I think I need to leave that now and maybe think about something else until those flowers are completely dry, and then put a bit more colour into them if I need to. Now that's black, but I don't really use black. If I do, I make up my own black with the 3 primary colours, but I'm actually going to use Payne's Grey for that pot, trough. And I'm going to work wet on wet. So I'm going to wet it first, being careful to stay within the shape that I need. And I like this Payne's Grey anyway because it's got a lot of blue in it. So I'm trying to be careful about working around these little pink flowers here. I can't see any shine on that pot at all, but we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll create a bit. But you don't have to work right up to your flower shapes. If you do, you're going to get a hard edge and they're not going to look, and it'll take the delicacy away. So try to be careful about this sort of thing and leave a little white space just around your little flowers that you're working on there. Gone back in with some water here just to create some texture. And it will be, shape your brush up as you actually pop it back in to get more paint, because sometimes these acrylic brushes tend to separate a little bit. So keep an eye on that, because sometimes that can work against you. Just bring the shape back as you pop your paint on. So darker underneath the flowers and letting it just float in that water so that I'm getting variation that way. I'm not getting a flat, boring shape. And it's got some little feet. Can't see any more. Then it will have some shadow underneath eventually, so that's going to be okay. Now I need to work on the terracotta one, which is it's quite a pale one, and it's got a lot of marks on it, which I'm not sure I'm going to go with, but we'll see. Looks as if it could do with good scrub. I've got to work around the spout of this watering can. And one side of this pot's going to be darker than the other, and I can't for the life of me see where the shadow is coming from on that photograph. So perhaps there wasn't very much sunlight when I took it. So what you really need to do, and what I should have done, is to have made a note at the time as to where the sun was coming from, where the shadows were being cast. All I can see at the moment are cast shadows underneath things. So I'm going to have to make that bit up. Just working around that spout there. So I'm going to have this as the darker side. So I've left a bit of white paper there. So if I actually pop a little bit of my blue into the side of this, it's going to be darker. I haven't wetted that bit. So things like that can be masked off if you find it easier. I quite like the challenge and the freedom of actually working around things, because I'm not always 100% sure of what I'm going to do, and I may change things around a bit when I'm working. So if you mask, then that doesn't seem to happen quite so much. Right, so top of this rim, it's got some sort of self-marking, some shapes to it here. Darker again there. Not the easiest pot in the world to paint. But I hope I've created some shape there with it and some texture. Just going to go back in here with some depth. Right. This is protruding, so it's going to look lighter. These little ridges that the thing has got. So I'm not putting too much effort into that at all. Because it's going to be darker under that ridge and under that one. Just softening the edge with water. not so much this side because it's the lighter side, but there is going to be some depth under there just to show that it protrudes. But keeping it reasonably loose, not getting too detailed and heavy with it. Okay, so that's that. And I tried to keep the pots reasonably light because I didn't want them to overpower the flowers. It's all about the flowers really there. I'll work on this thing now, this watering can, and I'm just going to use neutral tint for that, which is a nice grey, but I've mixed it on top of just a tiny little bit of the Payne's grey that I had left, which will give it a bit more of a bluey effect. I'm going to go back to my round brush because this is much darker at the bottom here. And it's darker at the top. Very dark inside there. It's got some cast shadow from the pot this side, so it's looking a bit darker. So I'll just drop that in, keeping it fairly simple. It's got a big handle. Go for it, I think. So if you're sitting at an awkward angle to do things, you can always turn your book around. I've actually moved myself so I can get to it a little bit more easily. Gets wider at the bottom where it meets the thing. Right, I thought it's a bit wet there. So if you paint things in sections like this, you're automatically going to get the varying aspects of the thing without working too hard on it. For instance, that's separate to this, so if you paint that as a separate section, then it's going to look separate. And you can go back and put a few darks in. Okay, I think that's enough for that. Steady hand needed for things like that. Right, so now all I need to do is a bit more depth under here, I think, underneath the flowers. I'm going to bring up the flowers just a little bit more. And that also gives it, creates better shape. You'll get the sort of a better form appearing, as if it's got, you know, a centre or something. But you mustn't overdo this, and maybe don't go everywhere. Leave the ones at the back a bit paler or darker, whichever you know, just look for variation. Don't think I need to do much on this little one. Just drop some water back in on there and make a darker area there. That's all right. These need a little bit of variation going on, so a deeper yellow through the centre of them is just going to make them a better shape. Right, these were more sort of orange. Bring that up just a little bit more. But if you've got something that you really like, I quite like that area there, I'm not going to touch it. Okay, good. So now they've got to have some shadows, and we need a little bit of something going on the cobbles. Not the cobbles, the pavements here, these things. So I'm popping a little bit of shadow under here for a start. Creating some shape with it rather than just smooth edged, and but really dark just underneath here. So in my head they're casting nice little flower shapes into the shadow. Definitely a lot of shadow under here. Again, you can wet it first and then drop the shadow in. These pavements are not very level, they're very chunky and they've got a lot of texture, so I'm going to keep the light behind there. I just put a little bit of purple into my shadow there because I didn't want it to be exactly the same colour as the watering can. It's going to be a lot darker under here. So this acrylic brush is quite good for dry brushwork, so I'm actually just running a little bit of dry brushwork around just to create some texture on those pavements, but they don't need a lot of work, so ease up on that. But they've got a lot of depth between them, so that's going to help to create some interest here. And that one's got a chunk missing. So this is going to give a bit of strength to the focal area here by popping this depth between these things. And they're not very uniform shapes, so I'm trying to create that as well. Popping a little bit of brown into my mix here, because just sort of indicating maybe soil or something. Another bit there that's broken. There. Hopefully they look a bit shabby. Oh, just moved the thing. Hope I haven't messed up there. I just hit my head on the camera. Having a lot of trouble getting my darks in. That's because I use a lot of water. It's better. Doesn't have to be everywhere, but right. So now I just want to indicate a bit of depth underneath this boarding. That looked as if it just stopped and came from nowhere. So I'm thinking about my little background. And now I've got some grass underneath the cat. So I'm not going to do very much there. Just the grass is looking so dreadful at the moment because of the lack of rain. It's got a lot of this colour. The cat's camouflaged in this colour. So I'm using up some of my terracotta just to create some texture in this foreground area. So an acrylic brush again will create nice texture marks for you, because, and dry brush work, because it's stiffer. Don't really want to do much more in this foreground here. It's not, I want it to be more about I want to lead into these pots and things. And I've just created a shape there, that's all. But this cat needs a bit of shadow, I guess. So I'm putting a little bit of purple in my terracotta mix and giving this cat some shadow. Not sure there'd be much behind there because I didn't pay attention to where the shadows were at the time. Well, I've superimposed the cat anyway. So maybe you could do something like that, put some life in a bird, a dog, a cat, a person. Because again, that's very good practice to try to superimpose something and get it right if you can, you know, the right size. So what I had to do when I looked at the cat was to have a look at the pot, and I know how big the pot is, realised how big the cat is, and that it was in front, so took that into consideration, and hopefully I've got it more or less the right sort of size. Okay, so I think that's just about it. That's my my little vignette of pots of flowers in situ. So maybe you could do a similar thing this week. It's slightly simpler than what we've been doing over the past few weeks, so it's quite nice to ease off and do something that's slightly simpler. Another one I did, but a while ago, quite a while ago, which will bring back memories to some of you because it's inside the monastery at Paleokastrica where they have loads of cats, and that one was sitting among I can't remember what that's called. Anyway, so a nice lead into the cats because I've kept it light here, put complementary colours together, used some technique on there, and another pot. So maybe try something like that from a photo from way back if you haven't got anything in your garden. You don't have to paint pots if you've already painted them this year and you haven't got any or you don't fancy it. You can put something else in. You can paint your bicycle if you wish, using line and wash if you wish, which I've done there. And again, a little bit of background because I've put the bike, in situ. I don't think it's rideable, but it looks pretty. So something like that maybe. Anything that you fancy in situ in a little corner of a garden. As always, it's better to paint outside if you can and from life. And we've got that opportunity at the moment because we're having good weather. So always think about getting out if you can, because it's so much easier than people think it's going to be, and the result is always nice and free and better. Next week will be the first in the next set, and so I will be sending you a YouTube every other week, as I've already told you. Payment can be made at the beginning of August and will cover 2 months. So in August you'll get 2 videos and you'll have 2 weeks to work on the technique that we'll be working on each particular month. So with having more time, perhaps you'll be able to paint more than one picture, or paint something that you want to paint using the particular techniques. But still send, if you do more than one and you want me to have a look at it for any reason, or just send it, and I'd love to see them. And I've still got some lovely flowers blooming, so next week I think I'm just going to concentrate on painting just 1 or 2 of my favourites before they go, and perhaps using some of the techniques from this month for a background or something. But not entirely sure, but I think that's what I'm going to do, because I'm looking at flowers all the time at the moment and wishing that I had time to paint them. So there we go. So have a good week, everyone, and I'll look forward to seeing your little vignettes. Take care. Bye-bye.